So, I just finished Marvel's Avengers, and let me just say the campaign was very, very short, but that is to be expected as this game is a service game. And with it being a service game, there are a lot of levels added in that have nothing to do with the story, repeated side missions with the similar mission structure and the same enemies and the same level itself with the same objectives. And this game gets very repetitive very quickly, and the campaign isn't quite as monotonous or tedious, but it also uses very similar level structure to these service kinds of levels that are added in that have nothing to do with the story. So yeah, the game is not extremely fun. I feel like it's a lot more fun to play with others, but when playing it solo, the game is not great. The game likes to overcomplicate itself as well for no reason really particularly, with half its upgrades being extremely unnecessary, and there's a lot of them, and I'm talking a lot that just don't need to be in the game because they don't really add much and they're very silly mechanics that they upgrade. So I don't understand why there's 3 different tabs of upgrades, all that require so many leveling up and a lot of level points to get to them, and I just don't understand why there's so many upgrades in the game for each character. On top of that, the level design, like I've already said, is just not great, and it's repeated levels, and especially in the campaign it can get pretty bad when you're forced to just play as a single player for one level, especially Iron Man levels, because he's designed to move very fast, dodge, and you're meant to be constantly moving, but these levels like to be like, here, you have to stand in this one area and avoid the A.I.M people getting into the area, and you have to kind of defend this area while you stand in it. And when you play as Iron Man, you die very quickly, and I'm talking very quickly, and it's not fun, especially when there's not really much you can do about it, and the game doesn't use strategy. It just tries to overwhelm you and throw as many enemies at you as it possibly can, and it feels like it's designed to have multiple players play for that level, but you're just stuck as the one person because they seem to have probably used the level from where you're meant to have multiple characters and put it on that one where you're just a single character. Now, in terms of the characters, I think that some are a lot more polished and thought out than others, and those characters actually can make the game a lot of fun. Cap and Black Widow are the most polished characters. They obviously aren't the most powerful of characters. They are pretty much hand-to-hand combat based. Black Widow doesn't really even have any powers, but they're a lot of fun. Cap utilizes a lot of his shield, and he's just a fucking brick house. He can just take down enemies very quickly. His shield has a little bit of weight to it, surprisingly, although his punches don't necessarily have a lot of weight to them. Black Widow has a grappling hook, which actually feels a lot kind of like Spider-Man in a way. And then there's characters that aren't so fun. Thor is probably the worst. I think that he needs a lot more polishing. He's very clunky and janky to play. He feels like you're kind of playing a robot, and it's a bit of a chore to play as him. His special character moves are extremely overpowered, and he does a lot of damage, but he can die very quickly because he's hard to control and he's just very slow. I think Kamala Khan is really fun to play, Miss Marvel. Whilst Iron Man is a lot of fun to play as well, but his gameplay is built around mechanics that just aren't polished enough, like the dodging system, which I will talk about later. And Hulk is brainless, and you just kind of, well, smash. And it's still fun. I think all of these characters are fun to play, even Thor at times, but there's just so much of a lack of polish that it can be a chore to play some characters, and some characters are just a lot more easier to play as, and you're probably going to find yourself playing those characters a lot more than the others. Now, one of my biggest issues, besides actual gameplay and anything to do with the story, is the RPG mechanics. They're just dumb. As the Hulk, I probably shouldn't be stopped in my tracks by a small laser beam or have to hit a sponge enemy who takes up all of my special ability to take down as the Hulk. Those moments just felt monotonous, tedious, which I'm probably going to say a lot in this review, and it wasn't a lot of fun to just sit there and punch an enemy and press circle occasionally when they tried to hit me. As the Hulk, I don't think my combat system should revolve around dodging. That's not what the Hulk does, and it was very strange, and I just didn't like it. And then speaking of damage sponge enemies, there's really a lack of diversity in the game's enemies. Now, near the end, there are some more challenging enemies that are actually kind of fun to play against and actually require strategy, but I've already said the game just likes to throw too many enemies at you that it just overwhelms you, and when they throw so many enemies at you to overwhelm you, plus these actual good enemies that require you to think, it just does not mix well at all. The combat can just be extremely meh. It's very average. I can't stress that enough. It is so average. And the game is a lot more fun to play when you're in the more cinematic linear moments, just walking around an area, exploring and looking into the lore of the world. That's where I found myself having the most fun with this game. The graphics, they're not great either. I mean, everyone's kind of talked about how the graphics in this game have not been amazing, and I gotta agree, they're just not up to par for a PlayStation 4 game in 2020. I really think they should have been better, especially if this game is coming out on the next generation as well. This game is probably going to be one of the worst looking next gen games that is a AAA game. Combined with a monochromatic color palette, it's not great, and it looks just not good. It just does not look good. And it's a problem. With that though, I think they also probably should have aimed for a more comic book like color palette and style and theme if they weren't going to put a lot of effort into these graphics, and I think it would have looked far better and probably worked a lot better with the game as well. Would have made it a lot more nicer to look at least. A clear sign that this game is not finished and requires a lot more polish is the fact that it is one of the worst optimized games I have played this year. There is ridiculously long loading screens that feel like a punishment almost for dying in a poorly designed game. Textures don't actually always load in, and cutscenes cannot quite pack the same punch that they should be packing when characters' textures don't load in properly and the character models are weird. Not to mention, I suffered some severe frame drops in just areas that the frame should not be dropping, and I played games like Control last year, which that game was allowed to have some frame rate drops because it looked beautiful, played amazingly, and was polished. This game doesn't play that great, it doesn't look that amazing, and I feel for a game that doesn't look that great and isn't the most overcomplicated of games, probably shouldn't be having massive frame rate drops to the point of where I'm running at about 20 frames on a regular PS4. Now, in terms of the story, it's pretty well written, and it is compelling. I mean, there's a lot of references to other comic book storylines as well as MCU references for the more mainstream fans, and I love that. I really like how they're complementing the both sides of the fandom. Kamala is a great protagonist with amazing character development. She kind of took me by surprise at how well she's written, and I was very shocked. She's actually a great character. However, in contrast, the game's main antagonist, MODOK, he's pretty generic, and the game even makes fun of it at times, but it's fine. Like, I didn't really necessarily have a big issue with that. His motivation and drive is very generic, is the best way to put it, and it just was whatever. I mean, by that point of the game when he's actually fully MODOK, I just didn't really care. The game's story though does have some pretty bad pacing at times. It does still feel like you're in the tutorial area by the end of the game because it still gives you tutorial prompts in the last level, and you only unlock all the characters by the second last level. That's crazy. That's very silly to me. And not only that, but when I was playing the last level, I was like, I'll play one more level, then I'll turn it off. And that one more level was actually the last level. Like, there was no sign of that being, this is the end, we're going to have to finish the game. No, it just was like, yeah, now we're going to finish the storyline. And it was like, what the fuck? Why? That's really weird. I guess this is the end now. And the game does have some pretty cringy moments as well, especially in the start. But all in all, I think the story is probably where this game shines best, and it's not terrible at all by any means. It's definitely a worthy comic book storyline, and I quite enjoyed it. That's probably why I played this game all the way through and why I finished it so quickly. Now, in terms of solo play, I think it's fine. It definitely seems more fitting to play with friends, and as a service kind of looter shooter game, I think it's obviously more designed to play with friends. But with that being said, the AI in this game is not terrible. When I played solo in the campaign, Hulk, Kamala Khan, Iron Man, whenever I'm not playing as them and they're my Avengers that I've built up, they play pretty well. Like, they do their job. I didn't have any issues with the AI at all in this game. It was really solid all around, and I was surprised by that. Now, other than these RPG mechanics that were my biggest issue, something that frustrates me the most in this game is that there's a lot of promising things in the game. The combat, the ideas, they were there, but they just weren't polished enough, and I thought if the game had just a little bit more time in development, we actually could have had a really fun, great game. Stuff like Iron Man's multiple weapons, the dodging mechanic, which worked well, but the game's camera is just terrible. And there's these indicators that'll pop up occasionally, but I find that they don't always pop up, and they're essentially useless because you'll get one indicator, but because the game is overwhelming you with so many enemies, you'll dodge, but then you'll just get hit by another attack anyway, making the mechanic essentially useless. But underneath all of this shit, there is a good game somewhere. Had this game had more time development by another year or so, it could have been a great, compelling game that I would have played more of and continued to play as a service game, even though I don't love service kinds of games. But I love the Avengers, I love these movies, and yeah, I was just not very happy with this. And especially when the game is over-monetized with extremely expensive microtransactions, and they're somewhat scummy and extremely unnecessary in 2020. Most game developers have moved past microtransactions by this time. They're a thing of the past almost, and they should be a thing of the past by now. It's not necessary. And Crystal Dynamics are really pushing these microtransactions. Nothing to do with gameplay, all cosmetic, and the cosmetics are like $20. $20 for a skin. That's ridiculous. I don't think that should be appropriate at all. And the game is unfortunately a solid 6 out of 10. The most mediocre of games of this year. AAA game that should have been better. And it turned out exactly how it looked. Clunky, unpolished, and developers trying to over-monetize a successful IP. I don't see where this game is going. I think it's going to die out very quickly after its release, which came out today. Yeah, I don't think this game is going to do great as a service game. Anyway, I've been Seth from Silver Soul Gaming. I kind of had some fun playing this game. Sometimes I did, sometimes I didn't. Sometimes I fucking raged playing this game because it's just not designed well. Anyway, you can check out everything Silver Soul Gaming in the description. We have a website, a Twitch, Twitter. Check all of that out. You can subscribe to the channel for more reviews, more coverage of a lot of AAA games, essentially. And yeah, I try to make a video every week. I did miss an upload last week, but it is what it is because it wasn't really anything to talk about. And I will be back next week, or maybe this week. I doubt this week, but hopefully next week with another video. Bye-bye.